All right, can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Oh, okay. Let's see. Speakers, I guess it's just whatever.
You know, it's funny. I think your voice actually got worse when you changed it to cable.
Did it?
You did, yeah. It was working fine when it was just the other one. I guess I don't know. That's
Right.
kind of odd.
That is pretty weird. I mean, I can switch back. It's whatever.
Try it.
All right, I'm back on the microphone.
I guess that's fine. Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah, you sound good.
That's yeah. I don't know what the heck that is.
That's
It's funny. It's funny because the settings I showed you are the exact same ones I use. You know, like for my own videos that I
right.
record for like software dev tutorials, and they sound pretty good. But I don't know. Maybe it's just your computer drivers, weird stuff. I don't know.
Probably it is a little tech stuff is a little weird like that.
Yeah. It's almost like there's nothing scientific about computers.
They aren't. It's magic. It's all magic to me.
Audio engineering it's a little weird for sure.
Also, AI is essentially magic since we can't explain it. We know how to construct them, but it's like who knows what goes on in that black box.
You know, it's kind of funny. Like I studied, you know, I literally went to school for computer science, right?
Yeah.
But I think I've told you before, like I've put so little effort into understanding AI that I basically, yeah, I just chalk it up to like, yeah, it's just you feed it a bunch of data. There's a black box. Let's just call it magic because I feel like that's kind of what it is.
I've been I've been reading up, like I'm trying to get like a base because I used to just read all the cool stuff that happened, but I'm like I need to get like some foundational stuff because it all seems so magical.
Right.
It's a little, from what I could tell, it's like all probabilistic. Like it's the thing is essentially guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it depends. There's like lots of models, but I mean it's kind of is magic.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've seen simple things where it's like it'll use like in terms of like the data sets, right? Like it'll feed the data sets into like, you know,
Yeah.
data structures that are pretty well understood, like, you know, trees and things like that.
Right.
But then the way it basically, you know, quote unquote decides is
Right.
kind of still a mystery to me.
Yeah. Well, it's
I
like
mean, these algorithms, I mean, they're, for lack of a better term, they're gross. You know, you look at the scientific studies and of these models, and like I can understand the algorithm, the pseudocode, you know, so to speak.
right.
I kind of don't want to. It's just
It's like you can abstract the like nitty gritty, like the top level, but if you had to like put it to pen to paper, it's like I can't do this. This is like ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. Basically, I mean, I think part of it it's when I took data structures and algorithms in college, I was a little scarred,
Yeah.
so to speak. You know, I mean, you know how it is with like those type of sciences. The professors aren't always the best.
Oh, I know.
Most of them they're working as software devs in the industry and they're teaching part time, so
Right.
a lot of them don't really care. And then by the same token, it was kind of my fault too, where I didn't put enough effort to understand
Right.
it myself. So when it came to like learning about trees and things like that, I was just like, this is
Decision trees, right? Yeah, fuck that.
yeah, like this is a little tough here. And based off the little I understand about AI, like it's pretty much all trees. I don't know. I'm like I could be wrong about that, but that's what I've seen.
Yeah, I've only gotten a lot of the conceptual stuff, and I have some idea as to how some of the probability stuff works, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still a long way from like anything applicable as far as I can tell. I'm still just looking at it like it's such a like I don't know what's happening.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of takes me back to, you know, conversations we've had in the past where it's like if it's not if it's not something that interests you, it becomes, you know, a chore to,
Right.
I don't know, to kind of figure out. And that's AI. It's as cool as it sounds, and like the technology is so applicable to pretty much everything. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
even people, scientists, they peg it as like, you know, it's either going to be humanity's downfall, or it's like it'll be us getting to, you know, civilization type one or whatever they call it.
Right. Those are always the options. It's like it'll kill us or just blast us, you know.
Exactly. Like knowing that, I still choose to stay away from it because I don't know.
Yeah, I
It,
mean,
kind of like physics. It's like it's interesting, but when you get down to the details, it's
oh, yeah.
Jesus, man.
Physics is one of those. Screw that.
Like I don't have the raw intelligence or the desire
Right.
to get into it.
Plus, AI takes like just from everything. It's like you need a strong CS, you need the math, you need a little bit of the cognitive psychology. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, y'all need to relax.
Yeah, it's highly specialized for sure. I'll say that.
Just give it some time. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, man. But I mean, not me. That's for sure.
I always tell the lads once we get functioning AI and decent like robotics, it's like it's over for the ladies. It's done. It's all men doing this crap. It's you'll immediately become obsolete, gals. It's done.
Oof, that's. I mean, that's a possibility. I guess there's three choices:
That's
downfall, utopia, or I don't know what the fuck the third one is.
well, it's like that Futurama episode where Fry like dates his robot, and they like and they show that video with the kid and Marilyn Monroe. Like, sorry, Dad, I'm with my Marilyn Monroe bot, and it's just humanity ends dying.
I guess there really are only two choices at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, assuming the biology doesn't give us like artificial wombs or something, and then it's like,
you know, that's a good point. Probably what's gonna happen. I mean, I remember I don't know if it was a book or Reddit post or some movie I watched where it's like in the not so distant future, right? It's like natural birth. It's almost rare.
Right.
Like, you know, you take the concept of designer babies, right, where you genetically modify and choose the best traits.
Yeah.
But then, like, yeah, they're not born out of a natural birth. It's like they're all done. It's all done in pods and shit, you know, like in the lab.
Right.
Like
that seems a little bit of ways off though, like because I haven't looked into any of it, so I don't even know if we have like anything resembling that yet, besides the designer baby.
Yeah, I mean, the designer babies like that. That's here now. I mean,
yeah,
lack of federal funding, sure, you know, it kind of prevents it from that, and the laws and regulations kind of prevent it from taking off.
Yeah,
but I mean, I feel like the technology is kind of there already.
I know. I mean, I understand the skepticism and like putting down some rules on it, but at the same time, you sort of just kind of want it to go. I just let the people do what they do and just see what we end up with. Like I doubt it'll be so disastrous.
I don't know, man. I feel like there's a lot of room for degeneracy.
Oh, that's definitely.
Yeah. I mean, how do you explain? I mean, not so much explain, but like, how do you govern society when you're literally gonna be creating a first class citizen?
Yeah,
that will grow up in 18 years, and it quite literally will be genetically superior. World War II style.
It's like what happens when you create just like 140 IQ, a whole generation of just super geniuses.
That has like that they're impervious to like disease and just physically, mentally, all the other illies gifted.
I think I have a couple of issues with that, but I would say the first is like if you have that many smart people, I can't imagine they're like there's a lot of things like if you're that smart, you don't want to work in a factory. Like even if you understand its utility, like you've seen the Rick and Morty episode where all the Ricks are like on a regular society doing all their stuff.
Yeah. Mhm.
and they all sort of like, you can sort of tell that they're all miserable and they all want to die because it's like they're all ricks. They're all supposed to be like super smart.
Right.
I feel like if we can't like fuck off and get more space to like diddle around with ideas and technology, it'll probably be a mess having that many smart people around because I don't think they'll want to do menial labor, to say the least.
Right. And I mean, kind of to, I don't know, I guess expand on that a little bit. I think that's part of the reason why like predicting the future is such a difficult thing, right? Because it's so multifaceted. It's not just genetically engineered babies, right? But it's also, adding back in AI and robotics and eternal youth and immortality that science kind of seems to be on the cusp. Like how will all those things work together, right?
Yeah, how it'll all coalesce. Yeah.
I mean, it almost seems impossible to predict it. There's this movie I watched a while ago. It's called Gattaca. I don't know if you heard about it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of what we're talking about, where it's like, despite the fact that humanity is at that point, they're all pretty much genetically modified and gifted.
Yeah,
like they suffer from the problem that everyone's uninspired because everyone's perfect and they're so smart,
right.
And then out comes this fucker that was born out of natural birth and has all these defects, and he still manages to be his genetically superior brother, which is kind of interesting.
One point for humanity, I suppose.
I mean, but that kind of begs the question, right? It's like, is it like against all odds? Like, would the human spirit really, like, can it really cover that much of a gap? I kind of doubt it.
Somewhat. It sort of brings me up to another point I wanted to bring up with the genetic engineering. It seems to me, from some of the stuff I've been doing in terms of math and in general, that like randomness plays like such a large role in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of things, it's actually better to do it randomly. Like there's like managing problems and where it's, instead of selectively picking stuff, it's much just efficient just to go random and then to start from there. And it sort of works the same for what I've seen for some of the AI algorithms. It's like you give it no information, you set every parameter randomly, and you just let it go to town. And it seems to me like all the like random genetic mutations, like I don't know if we want to just rid ourselves of that, because like there's a lot of variation and variety that could pop up, that even though it seems like strange and weird, it might be more beneficial to have than to just lock ourselves into some sort of perfection that'll probably doom us.
That's interesting. I hear what you're saying. I don't know. It's, again, I think it kind of goes back to like, it's kind of hard to predict or imagine, right? Like an example I could think of is like with sickle cell, right? Where it's like,
right,
that genetic defect, like, yeah, it's fucked up, that's a thing. But like, again, it almost seems like that was like, that happened out of the need to like, protect yourself against, diseases that were malaria, right? Yeah, that are from that area. Like, I don't know if that was like the best defense mechanism that the body could have come up with, right, but it's one, I guess.
Yeah, it's like, it's just completely random. I mean, I'm sure we could do better in some regards. I don't deny it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, sickle cell. That's an interesting.
Right. Yeah, but like I said, I don't know. It's so multifaceted. It's kind of difficult to.
Too many variables to try to predict.
Way too many variables. And that's kind of the problem with the sciences, right? Where it's like you try to isolate your variables and have controls, in place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all, well, there's something to be said about a lot of the variables just having no like discernible like value and change. You get me?
Mm-hmm.
Like some things just don't, you could toss out. Like there's a lot of variables that hold no weight. Like whether your car is red doesn't have that much, value in terms of whether you're buying a car. Like it's nice if it's red, but you probably care more about, say, mileage or horsepower.
That is true, but I mean, just shooting the shit for a bit, right? It's like what if red does have like some unintended consequence, right? Where it's like red attracted like some fucking bird that hit your windshield and then you crashed and then died or something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's like that's way too predictive at that point. It's like you don't.
It's true, but you know, kind of going back to like you know all these variables, like
Right.
you may think they're of no consequence, but we don't know, and it's
Right.
almost like observing like I mean I don't know too much about physics, but like, was it when you try to observe like an electron, like you move the
Right.
position because you're using light?
Yeah.
It's almost like that, right? Where it's like if you try to like account for all the variables, it's like isn't that itself another variable, and you're gonna
Right.
change
Right.
the state, so to speak.
True. Well, I mean, it's all easy. Like it's easy to point to the variables that mattered in retrospect, but because you know we can always go back and be like, well, all this stuff was important, but like someone back then might have given a lot of the technology that we had no thought. Like the internet was sort of like, who cares? The initial AI idea. It's so weird. Like there was AI studies happening in like the 60s and 70s, but it's like nobody gave it any thought because it's like, well, this is so slow and it's just so much easier if we just program stuff. And now it's like it's completely dominating everything.
Yeah. I mean, and we've reached a point to where you know our our computational ability is actually there. You know, I'm sure in the '60s it was kind of. I mean, you were so limited by the technology at the time to even do anything like what we're currently doing.
Sucks to be them.
Yeah, I mean, it's all steady progress for sure. And I'm sure people like, you know, 100 years from now, they're going to say the exact same thing about today. Right. Where it's like, we look at our technology like, holy shit, we've come so far in 60 years, but it'll be like, we'll be turtles compared to.
Right. It'll be like, look at these dirty cavemen. Can you imagine not being fused with AI? What a bunch of chumps.
And like having to use a calculator to do computations when they could just use like Neuralink to instantly know it or something. I don't know.
They actually coded.
No wonder they had so many mistakes and bugs. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. It's funny when we talk about prediction because I was reading, it's a science fiction book. It's a Dune. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the books are pretty good work of fiction. But in the book, the main character, I think his name is Paul Atreides. He sort of becomes like a messiah type god, sort of, and where he can there's this thing called melange. It's like spice, and it that combined with because there's two things. It's like they have people called mensats. I think that's what it's pronounced. They're like the human computers because they no longer have AI because it like completely destroyed everything. So they sort of all agreed collectively, hey, we're not fucking with that anymore. But they have humans that like think cognitively like AI. So they take in all the variables that the asker is giving them and they compute like just a straight like idea.
And they're humans?
Yeah, they're humans. There's nothing. And the spice, it's like it sort of taps into like the collective conscious and like anyways, the combination in them gives them sort of like the ability to see the future through like gigantic like spans of time and live not just in the future, but also the past, so he can like relive his ancestrals like lives and everything. It's quite interesting, but there's throughout the first two books and sort of the third, it's sort of implied that when the character Paul, who ends up being called Muad'Dib, when he looked into the future, he sort of solidified it. So it's like there was like these long, the way the author describes it, it's like there was this long wave of what could be the future, but in observing it, Paul like sort of solidified it into one strand. So he like through his vision, he like completely changed the course of future so that it became static.
Mm-hmm.
And the author sort of derides it, and so does his son later on, because it becomes so oppressive to like, because he creates like this gigantic government that just does nothing but like jihads across. They literally call it a jihad. He just goes around just subjugating all of humanity
Oh
in the
man.
right in the for the name of his vision, because he tried to avoid what he thought was a worse future. But the point is, I'm getting too much into the book. That they the book implies that if you could in any way predict the future, what you really would be doing is looking at the various like varieties of futures,
Mm-hmm.
and instead like causing us to like lock into one specific future, as
I
opposed to
see.
like, so as opposed to actually looking into the future, what you're really doing is sort of picking one out, and it's like, well, that's it, that's our stuff now. We've all sort of become enslaved to that future.
Mm-hmm.
Then it gets a little strange, and when his son comes into the picture, he introduced it. Not too. I'm not going to spoil too much, but it's an interesting. But I just thought it was, since we were talking about predictive models, I'm like,
uh-huh.
it had me thinking like about that book.
I'll have to give that a read. Yeah, no, I haven't read the book. So, and I think isn't there a movie that's releasing this year, last year, next year,
I
something
think
like
it
that?
released already. I don't know. I don't trust Hollywood, so I never watch anything.
I don't trust Hollywood. That's perfect. that
Yeah.
that did make me think like, do they answer, or do they answer the question, or do they even like how do I say this? Do they even make I don't know. I don't quite know how to ask this, but basically like the fact that the dude is able to see all these different futures, and
Yeah.
he kind of picks what he thinks is the best one. I mean, do they answer the question of like, is there free will then, or is it, or is everything predetermined, right?
Well,
Like
yeah. That's a good question. I think the last, because it's sort of strange, because I think the way it was that his looking into the future sort of caused a collapse in free will. So it's like
okay.
the fact that he could see, it's like there's no, like, if you could see the future, you would most likely act in whatever fashion like the future is like present itself to you, like especially if it's going to prevent your death or anything of the like.
Right.
So he sort of, in looking into it, he sort of like he basically just enslaves himself into the future and all of humanity. And his son embarks on a different, because his son's so weird in comparison to him, because his son has like, because the guy is like a fucking messiah figure.
Mm-hmm.
When he births he births twins, him and his wife, and they have like the collective conscious of all of like humanity's existence with them.
Mm-hmm.
So they could sort of tap into like anyone's personality, including their like parents.
Okay.
Yeah. And once his son Leto takes like the spice also, he comes to like a different conclusion that's like antithetical to to looking into the future. His whole thing is like there's no life without surprise. So he tries to do the best he can to like live in the present, sort of.
I see. He basically pulls like pickles from Futurama.
Sort of, but he does well, because his father was trying to avoid what was called the golden path. It's, I don't even know how to describe it. He essentially, where his dad was still human, he essentially becomes like this deity, like an actual like crazy being who's like half worm, half human, but not regular worm, mind you, like space worm. So he's
Space worm.
So he's like, I forgot. So he's like a mile long with like this thick like skin
Mm-hmm.
and I I haven't reread the book. I've only read it once, but from what I could tell is he essentially destroys all communication between humanity except for himself. And he sets himself up as like the ultimate predator
Mm-hmm.
in hope because there's it's like an he essentially sets up an evolutionary like arms race between himself and humanity in hopes that they can overcome what's essentially a god, like a all-seeing, all-knowing, omnipresent. Just mind you, he's not really a god, but he basically wants humanity to overthrow him. But it takes him a while. I think it takes them like 4,000 years before they come to scratch with that.
Huh. Interesting. I feel like you just described the plot to Attack on Titan.
Maybe. I mean, I haven't watched Attack on Titan.
It's completely different, but it's a somewhat similar premise. Interesting. Huh. Yeah, that's
Yeah, it's
makes you think. I'll have to read the book.
yeah.
So
I have like some notes on the book, but it's so weird. I don't know what the guy was smoking when he wrote the book.
that sounds like a good one though.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice, but I'd rather not have the power to predict the future. I do think it'd be a little weird. Too much knowledge. Too much.
As a side note, I just googled it. There's 6 books. Book 1 is 6. The fuck?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true. It's like a series. I stopped
Got
because
it.
I was looking into it.
Uh-huh.
I stopped. Let me look at series. Novel. I stopped, I think, at the 4th one, which is the one where he's like a worm god being who's 4,000 years into the future before somebody takes him out. Because I've heard that the story gets a little meh after that.
Mm-hmm.
And because the author's Frank Herbert.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the story gets a little meh after that, and then he dies, and his son just starts abusing the franchise name.
I see.
Huh. So I think the one I ended on was called God Emperor of Doom, which is, a cool name if nothing else.
Right.
What a down ass title.
Yeah, for real.
Don't mind me, just the God Emperor pulling up.
God Emperor.
Yes.
Jeez. Yeah, I have to add that one to the list for sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have the books if you'd want to borrow them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that sounds good. Huh.
I'll just pull up one of these.
That reminds me, completely off topic, but something I was thinking about the other day. Do you read more than one book at a time?
Yeah, I do.
How do you keep track of it?
I have a lot of bookmarks for my each. Well, that's a given, just so I know what my place is in each book.
Right.
But I do a couple of things. First, I take notes, but I usually take different. My notes are a little weird. I sort of explained it to you that time.
Mm-hmm.
But what I try to do just to keep the story intact is I usually read, depending on what I'm reading, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. But it's sort of the same thing. I usually go chapter by chapter just because it's easier to get myself to focus. It's like it's easy to just say, well, I'm going to read one chapter as opposed to just setting a specific time or anything.
Right. Yeah.
So I read the chapter, and then after I'm done reading, I usually try to see if I can summarize what I've read without looking through the pages. So just to make sure I got whatever it was that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then I write anything of interest down as a note. And But I don't know. It's not that hard to keep track of like what's going on in a story. Maybe the stories I've read aren't that complex, or maybe the information that I've read isn't too crazy, but it doesn't seem that bad unless I've like as long as I'm reading them day by day, each of the books, it's not too crazy. Like if I leave a book for like a week, sometimes I look at the chapter and I'm just like, this looks a little funky. I don't remember what was happening. And anything longer than that, it's like, well, I'm going to have to start all over because I don't know what the hell's going on.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think I've ever really had I guess like trouble with like picking up multiple books and reading them at the same time. I don't really take notes, like, and it's kind of weird to say.
Right.
Like I'll make like, I guess like a note of the page that I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And but I won't really, I don't really have a system in place for writing notes. Reason I brought up is more so like I've like I'll always be reading like multiple books, you know, around the same time. But I have the problem where it's like I start reading so many damn books at the same time. I never finish them, or like I get bored, or like my interest, you know, veer off to something else. And like 2 weeks later, I'm like, oh shit, I was supposed to finish reading this one, and I didn't.
Right.
And you know, usually for the most part of my entire existence, it hasn't been a problem.
Right.
You know, as you know, I'm a rather methodical person, so I always kind of follow a schedule.
Yeah.
But lately, since you know I've had more time now that I don't have a real job, it's like, oh god, I have like 6 books that I've been reading and I haven't finished any of them.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this doesn't feel like it's working, you know?
Right. I mean, it's I sometimes have the same problem where it's like I just start. I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. Let me start reading this book. Let me read this one, and it's like, then I'm looking at a stack of books that I'm like, I can't read like 15 books at the same time. Like I don't. That's way too much information to process.
Yeah, it's almost like the problem is there's so much good stuff out there that it's like I can't like not pick that up, you know?
Yeah. What I do is I like start cutting back. Once I start doing that, I'm like clearly I want to read all of them, but maybe there's something that has my attention right now that more than the rest. So I just start slicing down until I notice like, okay, really I'm reading 4 books with like enthusiasm, like a couple that I want, like, and the rest are just sort of like right now I have a few books, 1, 2, probably like 4, 5, 6. But I try to keep all the other books out of sight so that I'm not just running towards them to start reading.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like that would be a bit helpful.
Yeah, but I just go, I think the chapter by chapter makes it like nice and easy. It's like, all right, I'll just read 1 chapter of each and then just so that I don't get too swept up in one and forget about the others.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I think if anything for me, it probably just comes down to self-control that I need to learn with with just reading all these damn books and learning new things.
I know. I mean, I just like if I could, I'll just start reading them all like back to back to back. But it's like I need to like relax. Like also if I'm rereading, I'm like maybe I should wait to finish one of the newer books before I reread something.
That is true. Yeah, definitely. I feel like at this point, like I have so many damn books. I'm probably not gonna finish reading them.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's boxes of them now too. It's a problem.
Right. I sort of laugh.
I still keep buying.
I know. I catch myself on Amazon. I'm just like, man, these are looking nice. Let me buy some of these. And I'm just like, hold on, I need to finish. I got like a stack of books I need to finish. Let's close that tab real fast.
Yeah, it's I think because I think we're kind of similar in that respect where it's like we're not I mean it's kind of weird to say like you're reading for pleasure, right? But it's also just like for the pursuit of knowledge.
Yeah.
And just for the sake of it. It's not like because there's might be a specific goal in mind.
Right.
And I feel like it's kind of weird because I've had was talking to, I guess like the only other friend I have outside of our actual friend group, because he's pretty similar in that way too. Where and he's a little bit more social than I am, so he was talking to like to his friends, and he's like, well, why do you read so much? Like, what's the point? Like, like it's not like you're in school or your career is already like midway in, and like you're not gonna get fired if you don't keep reading, right? If you don't keep learning. And then he's just like, I just want to learn. He's like, but for what's the purpose, right? It's like there is no purpose.
It's an end in itself. It's like I just
It's
want to
yeah,
learn.
I just want to learn. It's like learning for learning's sake, I guess, and I guess that kind of fucks with a lot of people, right? Like, 'cause there has to be a method to the madness, I guess, or a reason for everything.
Like some dragons hoard wealth and gold, and some of them hoard knowledge.
And there's no reason for you either.
No reason, I just like it. No need to. Yeah, I found it funny because I don't remember. I don't know how the subject was broached with Vince about books and reading, and I think because I'd mentioned I went to Barnes and Noble, I think, and he was like, he's like, he was mentioning whether I look for them for the PDFs because I'm like, might as well not pay if I can. And then he mentioned, he's like, but people are just buying books. He almost mentioned like almost his vanity, like, just to show off, to show that you have. And I was thinking like, well, that might be the case for some, but it's not. Nobody goes into my room. Like there's no showing off my vast
that's a good point. It's like yes, you might be right, but you failed to take into account my excessively antisocial personality.
Right.
That is true.
I'm sure there's some like I've seen like there's a lot of YouTubers that are and like people on like social media, the kind that are like the finance people are always like and stuff like and the fitness people are always like showing all the books and stuff they're reading and
yeah, but I mean I don't want to come off as like jaded.
Right.
But I mean affiliate marketing, right? Like they read a book and regardless of whether or not there's a good intention and they learn something, like they're gonna make a little profit just by doing that, and that might even be the whole point of their channel, right? It's just spread
I don't have anything against it. Like it's they're selling their image, and good for them. It's probably a better one to sell than a lot of the others. Hey, I read and I work out and
buy my course.
Making better. It's like maybe ignore the buy the course part, but like I don't know, maybe if it works, but like I don't have anything. What people choose to do is their business. But
true that. Yeah. I don't know. It's if I'm being honest with you, I don't like. I look outside like the close circle of friends that we have, which is like I don't know, 5 or 6 people probably, and then I guess into like the outer layer of like acquaintances, and specifically the ones that are more like outgoing, more social. And like I don't know. I never really see or hear or like them reading or posting about reading or anything, as much as I see them going out and getting drunk and having fun, their version of fun, at least. I don't know.
Well, it's not like reading was ever like the national pastime or anything.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I don't think it's anywhere close to a popular anything.
Right. I guess you could say there's some like advantage like in saying that you're sort of implying like, look, I'm an intellectual, I'm a smart prick, look, I'm reading, but but like as aside from that, I don't know what advantage there is to be gained. Like it's not it doesn't have that much social value to say that you read aside from a few things like that.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that. Like, it's like I read 50 books this year. Okay, like I don't.
Like nobody gives a damn. They might ask you, "Oh, what did you read?" But like you could
as like small talk or a talking point,
right? Right. You could have just as easily said, "Oh, I went to EDC this year," and that might get you more.
Yeah, you plug it more out of a person,
right?
By saying that.
Right, people have their interests, and I mean, I don't castigate them. Raves seem interesting. These pseudo-religious activities, but
pseudo religious activities. That's
what else do you put it as when just people congregate en masse? They take psychedelics and just vibe to music. Like that's like
that's
the
a cult.
original. That's like the original like religious experience right there.
Including the drugs, like I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of like scientists trying to posit that the original, a lot of, because there's like a lot of shamanic experiences that they go into some kind of trance and elucidate wisdom.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it's like a lot. It's sort of they sort of been looking into some stuff that it might be the case that they might have been doing shrooms for that.
That is a good point. Yeah. I mean, I kind of always just chalked it up to theatrics. That gets people more. I don't know, believing into the whole system. But yeah, I have read, like, especially with like a lot of like indigenous tribes and stuff like that, where like they would like slit their wrists, bleed out basically, and then they would start to see the light and things like that. So
there's also belief that like the original communion, how it's like wine and bread, that the fermentation process for the wine might have also caused hallucinations amongst the congregation who took it. So there might, I mean, it's like, I think it's the fact that I always mention that like the same thing you get from like DMT in the brain, it's the same thing that some people get when they do experience like religious fervor.
Right. Yeah.
So there's certainly some strange connection there.
Yeah, I was watching this YouTube video the other day. I forgot her name. She's basically like a financial influencer, advice influencer, like on YouTube and stuff like that.
Right.
She's talking about her experience with DMT, and the way she describes it was pretty trippy. I mean, I guess to provide some background to that.
Right.
She kind of came into the whole psychedelics world not knowing anything.
Yeah.
And right off the bat, she goes straight into DMT, which
that's funny. Right.
I'm not well versed with all these different types of drugs. Or I haven't really read much into it. But from what I've read, it's like you don't go straight into DMT. Like that's kind of crazy. Like you want to work your way up to that if you're into that.
Yeah, you're learning to swim. You don't just drive in right into the deep end.
Yeah, exactly. So, and she went into it with like an expectation that it was going to be great based off what she's heard from other people.
Right.
But for her, it was like hell, like essentially hell. Like, she said she woke up like in this world and she was being pulled apart by like white faces and shit like that. And
bad trips can be super.
And it fucked her up for years on end. But the point she was getting across is like, the point that she was getting across was that if to her it felt so weird, it felt so real, right? Like,
right,
where she really thought she was in this other dimension, and like, and even to now, that's what she believes in. Like, like these drugs, they let you see these other planes of being, and that the fact that it's so real. So,
right,
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't quite. I mean, sure, yeah. There's so much we don't know, and science can't explain it. Like, maybe there is.
I have
things
I have a few things to say to that. The first is sort of an interesting tidbit, and it's my psychology teacher in college also talked about that, where she talked about, because I don't know how you always got to bring up the psychedelics. It's an interesting topic, and she was like, she had mentioned 2 of the trips that her students had. One guy said that he had talked to Jesus. And she was like, he didn't just like see him, like he talked to him like that. Or they had a conversation and he remembers it like quite vividly. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. And he's like, what about the other guy? He's like, oh, the other guy saw the devil. and she's like, it completely messed him up. Like that was such a horrific trip that he just never, like, it's not, you don't quite recover from that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what she said to like, I mean, she had tried that when she was like in her mid-20s, I think.
Right.
And even like 4 or 5 years later, like from that experience, she developed like the fear of death, right? Where whenever she saw like, anything related to that, like she just, like her brain just could not could not hold
Right.
it together, and it's taken her like 5-6 years to get, I guess, at peace with that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's if anything, I'm more interested in like the fact that your brain is able to
produce anything like this at
produce
all.
anything like that, more so than than the possibility of other planes of existence and beings
Right.
of like, quote unquote higher energies existing.
Yeah.
To me, it's like isn't it kind of crazy and fucked up and trippy that your brain can
Right.
can do that?
Yeah. Well, to me, it's like, it's crazy that it can produce it naturally. Like, there are people that have like legit, like, I have no dog in whether what they're seeing is like, is real. Well, not reals might not be the right word, but whether it's something that exists
Right.
in a different sort of facet that everyone could probably tap into. But it's so strange that people could have those kind of experiences at all. Like, someone can like experience a religious experience at all. Like, it's so mind boggling, because like I think it's probably the same for a lot of modern people. They have like no sense of like the religious in the same way that I would say other people used to have it. Some people still do, but like, you see like the people that are like, it's always a little comical to watch, but it's also like interesting, like when you have like the possessions, and some of it, like some of them are like theatric, you get me? Like, the guy knows, but there's always someone that they're like, who's this guy? Like, why did this guy come in? Like, when I told you about the Jim Jones podcast, the guy who did the podcast on Jim Jones, like a couple days ago.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah. He used to fake like a lot of that stuff because he knew it would get him a lot of followers.
Right.
So he used to fake like healings and possessions. But even he didn't mention sometimes that he would fight, because he sort of got sucked up in his own hype to some extent.
Right.
Because he would look around and he would be like, some of these people, these aren't the guys I planted. Like, who are these people? And how is it that I managed to, heal their leg or unpossess them? Like, who are you people? Why the fuck did you have this experience around me?
Right.
And I think to myself, like, there's a lot of people out there having like these religious experiences, and I'm just like, what evolutionary purpose does this serve? How real is it? And a lot of other questions like that.
Yeah. No, that's I think more than anything, I've had conversations with other people about this. It's like, as much as I like to shit on religion itself, not so much the people, but just the religion as the idea itself.
Right.
It's like I never like to speak in absolutes, right? As much as I might sound like a smartass or just a dick, because like there's just so much that I guess that you can't know, like, kind of like we talked about the other day, the concept of death, right? It's like, well, the only way to know what death really is to die, and then you can't explain it, or at least we don't know how we would explain it.
Right. You have like, there's no coming back. No, hey fellas, I experienced death, and oh my god, was it?
It's like, it's like, yeah, like what is on the other side? What is this nothingness? And like, just thinking about it will fuck me up for days on end.
Right. But, non-existence doesn't make any sense, but yeah.
That's the problem. It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, so it's like, I like to, every now and then have that conversation, or just thinking about it, because it really will humble the fuck out of you. Just to think like that.
I mean, that's like the whole Stoic thing, right? Meditate on death just a little bit.
Just a little bit, yeah. To put things into perspective.
Yeah, there's this essay called, I think I told you about it, called "The Screamers." It's not too important, but in it describes this guy, the CEO who used to, before doing like any kind of speech or major decision, he would envision himself as someone in Auschwitz. So he would like sit down, and he described some of it. Like, he would sit down and he would like visualize himself digging his grave like barehanded, at the command, and at gunpoint,
Right.
and then being shot to death and being thrown in his own hole.
Mm-hmm.
And he was fairly successful until he had a mental breakdown. So you can imagine what kind of maybe not meditate too much on the horrific.
Yeah, no, visualization. It's pretty powerful stuff, man.
Yeah. Well, it's like you've had dreams, right? Like I'd imagine. It's like some of it, like I feel some of the stuff, and it's just like, what the hell does this mean? Like I wake up and it's like that clearly wasn't me. Like that was a dream. But I felt a lot of the stuff that he felt. Like, was there some reflection in reality? Was it all just in my head and I felt nothing? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah, that's I don't know. It's I haven't gone, and this is something I kind of want to get into, like at least like learn more about. It's like the study of like the subconscious and what
Right.
dreams mean. And I know, and I have read some a lot of like the studies into like dreams and subconscious. Like a lot of it has been it's not you can't replicate it in studies.
Yeah.
So that's actually a huge problem in psychology. So it's like where do you start, right? If you can't even replicate a lot of those studies anymore, they're just not, the data isn't valid.
It's who knows what the hell is going on there.
Yeah, it's a bit of a trip.
Right. I'm sure we could look at some of the mechanics of what happens when we dream. Like I've always wondered, well, the thought just sort of came to me, like, how we do MRI scans and all of that and brain studies when we see people sleep. Have we done that with like lucid dreamers?
I mean, I'm sure there's like a case or two ongoing somewhere. I've never looked into it myself, but like there has to be something out there.
Because like the people that can like control or have some like cognition of their dreams, like those guys would like study those pricks. Well, it's like that's also so strange because it's like it's a bit self-reported, and it's like how applicable is it to like everyone else? I don't know. That's a weird.
Right. Yeah. With respect to like lucid dreaming itself, and I guess you kind of say it to a lesser extent visualizations.
Yeah.
I've read about people that that can achieve lucid dreaming like on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
That it's almost like if they apply themselves to it, like they they get to the point where like they can do it consistently, and then they have like free reign within their own little, I don't know, mental space.
Right.
Like they're able to like fuck, I kind of forgot. I wish I would have saved those articles, but it's essentially like they're able to like train, like do physical training or mental training, or like imagine like they're about to take a test or do a presentation, and like for them it actually would increase their performance when doing the real thing in real life. Yeah. And I don't know if I'm pulling this out of my ass, but I want to say like there was this one guy, I don't know if it was a study, that he would do like physical training, when he was lucid dreaming. And then when he would like, go into the gym or something, like he was like physically stronger because like his muscle fibers were actually firing when he was asleep.
Jesus.
Yeah. I don't know how true that is. I might just be pulling that out of my own dream.
I've heard that one too, right? Esteban told me that one. But that's still strange. That's super strange. It's
a little odd. I mean, crazy how we know so little about our own brains.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we don't know about. Like, it's like there's a gigantic, like we have a lot of knowledge, but then there's still like a fuck ton that's just still unanswered.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it was that kind of felt like who said it? There's this person that said like we were born like in the wrong era. It's like too late quote. Too late to explore the world, but too early for space travel. But it's like
just right to shit post on the internet.
Just right to shit. There you go. But what I was really gonna say is like we're too early to have been born like in an era where it's like I don't want to say like it's all been discovered because that might be a little boring, but like at the same time, like wouldn't it have been fucking amazing to like be born in that time period where like nothing is a mystery anymore and you can kind of go crazy with all the inventions that have been.
Yeah, like here's an open sandbox. Go to work, do whatever.
Pretty much like the equivalent of having like all the GTA cheat codes, right?
Yeah, just having them all on.
Possibilities are limitless. I don't know. I always find that kind of interesting. Although I think it probably could get a bit boring.
Maybe it could certainly can get a little. I mean, it's how well you can entertain yourself essentially. But I mean, I'd imagine there'd be other people you can interact with. True. I mean, I don't know. Like you get a lot of people going, it would have been interesting to be born before this XYZ. And I'm just like, y'all suck. Today is much better than any time before us. You got, it's like, it's so underappreciated how great our time period is, even with because it's so easy to see what's bad, especially with the internet, because it's like, it's so easy to focus on the negative, given that we're sort of wired to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the internet, that's an interesting one, right? Because like, I mean, and I'm sure you're quite aware of quote unquote the algorithm. It creates these silos, right?
Yeah,
where it only shows you what you're most likely to respond to. Basically giving you a stimulus. Right. And if it thinks you like it, it'll keep showing you that. So in effect, what we end up having is these groups where they're actually overrepresented, but you don't know that.
Yeah,
and it's a weird thing.
Yeah, everyone thinks that they have the correct. It's like the internet's just so full of. It's interesting. The same thing that makes the internet so great is somewhat of a deterrent on the internet, because you could say that there's a lot of niches now that can be like a lot of things couldn't be done in the physical world because it's too difficult to get like these sort of niche groups together. And like there's no like people can only like in physical reality, I can't listen to all these professors lecture and talk to each other and all that because I would have to physically be there with them. So there's like tremendous advantage in a lot of things like that. But at the same time, you can like congregate just like extremists and idiots and all these people that are just sort of like screwing each other over, like in terms of the perception of reality, like all together. And it's like, well, like it's not much. It's not even like it's the internet's fault per se. Like that's just human. You get me?
Yeah. I mean, you can say like the internet represents like the best and worst of humanity, right? It's kind of how it is. But by the same token, it's like I think, and I probably say this without a doubt, the internet has been a net positive for humanity, despite all the downsides that kind of starting to experience. I mean, and to start with, it's kind of crazy to even think the internet's only really been around. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say like 1995, 1996, but most people, at least in the US, didn't really get internet until like 99 or 2000, it started becoming a thing like early 2000s, and then it really hit like mainstream like in 05, 06, 07 on. Well, so it's such a recent invention, and it's had such a profound effect on our lives.
Well, I would say the main delineation for me is it's so strange is like you categorize history and sort of like you can go like the civil rights. You could say stuff like you can categorize it in terms of war. For me, for the technology, it's pre-cell phone. Then it's like then you get your initial. The internet's still there and it's doing stuff, but the majority is not cognizant of it because it's like you had like people in 4chan who are just like shit posting and They spit out like the hacker group Anonymous, and they're like helping out with like civil wars and a bunch. And it's like there's like sort of a bleep there going on there, and time progresses, and it's like now we have like pseudo smartphones where it's like the kind you and me had during high school, where it's like it had the internet, but not really. Like it was like the terrible like Oracle web browser that you could just never look up anything on.
You were still on 2G,
right?
So it take 3 minutes to load.
Yeah, but that's like for me, that's like the Facebook era, where it's like, you know, we had MySpace, and it certainly had some influence, but it never had the staying power or the like brains behind it that Facebook had. It's like Facebook just sort of swept everything. People are still using it for some fucking reason. And it's like all the older generation used it. And then once the smartphone hit, that's where I think it hit the mainstream, because it's like now you had like newscasters like quoting tweets and all this other stuff. It's like we had become so integrated with the internet. It's like no one even gives it a second thought anymore.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many technologies that completely change how it is that we exist, that we don't even think about it like we have. Like Tinder should have been one of those things that should have been marked down in history just because of how completely it changes dating. It's like you could just sit at home and swipe right like it's a game. And some people do treat it like that. Then you have like Snapchat that lets you like send messages with some anonymity to some extent. Then there, you know, we started getting all the other apps, Instagram, Twitter, that hellhole, and YouTube, which I think is probably one of the greatest. And, you know, just everything else that came along with that.
Yeah. And to kind of like add, I guess, a bit more of like the technical side to it, you know, like with like, you know, and starting when the internet first came out, again, I'm going to keep saying like 1995 or so. I don't quite know the exact dates.
Fair enough.
So basically right around the time that we would have been born, give or take, that was like the web 1.0, right? Where it's like, but at that time, the internet solely exists kind of like, you know, in a book format, right? Where it's like just read only. It's just plain text, mostly just informational purpose, right? Like you can look up, I don't know, books or studies or whatever. And then if you know, travel, fast forward, you know, 5-6 years or so. And then you start getting, you know, web 2.0, which is dynamic content, you know, HTML, CSS, videos, RSS feeds, things like that. YouTube being born, MySpace being born.
Well, it's like, I think you skipped one thing there that I think is like super important. And I probably should have mentioned it. It's email.
Sorry. Yes. Email. Yes.
Email is like super important.
Huge. Yeah. So yes. Yeah. The email, of course.
All the shady stuff that happened with that. Oh my God.
Yeah. So, and we're kind of still there. Like we're like kind of in the intersection of Web 2 and Web 3, where, you know, Web 2, we have, you know, the Facebooks of the world, YouTube, all that stuff. But then Web 3, what it promises to be, and I guess still like all the ambiguity around it, where it's like Web 3 is kind of like supposed to fix all the messed up stuff of Web 2.
Right.
Where, you know, we have like these ultra mega huge corporations that just harvest your data because people give it away for free.
And that's that's an important point though there. It's not like they're like going into your like laptop and hacking it. It's like you're giving most of this shit away.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, you sign up and you willingly give it away. And now it's gone to the point that, you know, like all pretty much any service you have, it's almost like partly subsidized the cost by the data you give away.
Right. It's like you're 1 second into opening something and it's like, oh, here's this agreement. Here's all the stuff we're going to take from you.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, Web3 is kind of interesting. in that there still is some ambiguity of of like again like we can't predict the future, but like in terms of what it's supposed to do, it's supposed to decentralize information, right? Where it's like now it's not owned by all these companies, it's owned by quote unquote the people or the networks.
Right.
Also, for the first time ever, with through cryptocurrency, the money will be yours instead of at the mercy of the the money printer, so to speak. So what it'll do for people, I have no idea. But even so, like kind of going back a little bit, what we're currently at with Web 2, and why I say that it's still a net positive despite all the bad things is it's introduced so much opportunity that I think people they're just starting to understand it, right?
Oh, I
Where it's
know.
like it's like sure you can go to work or go to school, get a career, but you don't have to follow that traditional path anymore. Like you can almost kind of like pick any niche out there, no matter how small it is, and you could probably make a living off of it.
Right.
If you work hard enough at it because of the internet now.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's crazy.
Well, it's like if you don't like if you're fine with not being like a super millionaire, because like not everyone's going to be like something, but there's a lot of because it's like on YouTube's like such an interesting one because if you can sell yourself and whatever, like if you have any kind of modicum of talent or just a good personality, like you can immediately shoot up in the ranks and just sell yourself. And then like, that's it. And that's your job now. Like you're just selling and you can sell your hobbies too, which I think is like beautiful and brilliant. It's like, I like painting figures and it's like, oh crap, now I have 100,000 views per video. It's like, what? Like that job never existed at any point in reality until the internet spawned. It's like, you can now just paint figures for a living. Like that's your job now. You sell them, you advertise like that. It's like, oh, I just do woodwork. Oh, what the hell? People want to see this online for some reason. Like I think a lot of the videos that get a lot of views, or at least sometimes go viral, are videos of people that have a modicum of talent in their field and a genuine interest in it. Because it's like it's so like you can tell when someone likes what they're doing. Like it comes out in their speech. Yeah. And it's like it's sort of infectious. You just sort of like, oh, look at that. You almost gain like a cursory interest because of how they're speaking of it. Yeah. Because they're explaining it to you. They're like, here are all the shit I'm doing, and here's why I like it. And it's like, oh, okay, this is cool. And it's like that none of those jobs existed beforehand. It's like you could do that as like a side thing, but now it's like that could be your job. You could do that. You can make an extra buck like that. Yeah,
it's and the crazy thing is like I don't know about you, but I kind of didn't realize that was a thing. Even though it was pretty clearly obvious if you spend any amount of time on YouTube or Instagram or whatever social media you look at. Right. To me, it didn't quite become obvious until I started at university, where it's like for the first time I had this is unrelated, but for the first time I had to learn how to study and learn for myself because I never learned that in high school. Right. So I started looking up tutorials and like programming tutorials. I'm like, wait, there's people that have like millions of views on like this Java tutorial or whatever it was, right? Or iOS programming. Right. And you start doing the math, in terms of like how much is a million views worth in ad revenue or sponsorships. Like holy shit, some of these people are making
decent money,
much more than a software engineer is going to make in a year, just from a few videos. Yeah. And that's kind of where I left it at. But then it really wasn't until like Instagram came around and became very, very a huge thing where it's like, okay, suddenly these people, they're creating, photos or videos or whatever content it is. Again, based on what you're saying, on just their interest. And at first, a lot of it was just, photography, because, that's what Instagram was known for at the time. Right. But then it's something that you start seeing people like, oh, I am a reseller. I go to garage sales and I sell stuff.
Yeah.
But then they're also making a huge income from posting videos on Instagram, teaching people how to do that as well, right? Or it's like people that are into woodworking, or people that like to do electrical shit, and suddenly it's like, wait, these people, they don't have quote unquote real jobs. They're essentially just like attention arbitraging, and they're garnering enough attention to get sponsorships from big companies, and that's how they make their living. And to me, like, I remember when I first explained that to like my parents, because every now and then I'll like, as a joke, you say, like, you guys never let me be a professional gamer, even though that's kind of what I want to be, and just to get kind of as a joke.
You probably could have.
I probably could have, yeah. But it's just a kind of like friendly banter. It's not, I don't really mean it or anything.
Right.
But it's like it's almost like if I had, I guess, paid more attention, or maybe been born a year or two later, it probably could have happened, because then I probably would have been able to use these platforms as they were coming up, right?
Right. It would have been a little more you would have been more cognizant of it. You'd be like, oh, there's Twitch, there's all these, like, people are watching gameplay a lot more than you think. Like, it's because I found the internet a lot later than everyone else. Like, I had it briefly as a kid, and when I was like 6, and I would just look up video game characters, like, just no idea what the hell I was doing. And it was like the first time I was with you and I brought my laptop to your house, I was just like, oh shit, like, did you know I could just YouTube like Harvard lectures? Like, what the fuck? Like, this is free?
Yeah. Exactly. And the whole reason I brought up the whole, like, wanting to be like a professional gamer when I was like 13 is because it took me almost embarrassingly too many years to realize the potential that the internet has. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just because our previous generation didn't really have internet until they were much older. So, like, how are they gonna show us that has potential, right?
Right.
But I don't know. It's
yeah.
I don't really know what I'm going at.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
the internet.
It's
something else. I don't quite know how to say it, and I feel like with the pandemic that we had in the past, year or two,
right
now, people finally kind of like woke up to it, right? Where it's like, I mean, I'm sure you noticed this, but like there was an influx of like TTV Twitch gamers, right, over the past years. It's like, what else were you gonna do, right? But it wasn't only that. It was people, and it's probably why TikTok kind of blew up like crazy. Where it's that you can make it as a predominantly video centric app. It's like now you can share your interest or your hobbies, and you can monetize them.
Right. Well, there's another advantage to TikTok. As much as I dislike TikTok, that's on a personal level. There's like a super advantage in that, one, you could do it off your phone, and two, like, the videos are short. Like, coming up with like any video that's like longer than like 5 minutes, it's like the amount of work you would need editing, uploading, all that. Like, stacks up so fast that, like, even if you had,
it's a hassle. Yeah.
Even if you had the idea of making a video, you'd be like, oh, okay, I'm kind of lazy, I'll just not do this. But if you do that instead, it's like, if you do like a TikTok video, it's super easy. Like, it's like minute. It's like what they're like. They cap out, right, at like a minute 30 or something. Yeah,
they cap out at like, or I think it's around a minute or so. Yeah, exactly. So like, the barrier to entry, it's very low, and TikTok, I think it came out at a perfect time. Even better than Facebook did, right? Although Facebook has first mover advantage, but what TikTok has is it's like the silo effect on steroids, right? Where it's like it's very good. The quote unquote algorithm is very good at finding your people for you very quickly.
Right.
It's kind of scary how well it can know what you like very quickly.
Plus, there's like there's no investment. Like, there's no long investment in terms of time per video. So it doesn't, even though I'm pretty sure like the average user time when they actually go on is like a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I'd imagine
Yeah.
you watch one video like, oh, 1 minute, boom, 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 and you're like, then you look up and it's like, oh shit, I've just watched like 10, 20 videos straight.
Exactly, because and the thing is, like, each successive video you watch, the app, it's learning what you like and what you don't
Right.
like, so it starts showing you better and better things, right? And again,
Right.
it kind of goes back to like after a few videos, you've found your people essentially,
Right.
right? Like, of what you like to see.
Right. It found your niche much quicker than anywhere else. Like
Exactly, and like the concept. I mean, aside from like the whole political and controversial issues that the
right.
app has, like I said, it's so perfect, right? Because it struck a chord. Like I said, the target demographic is not us. I mean, yeah, sure, yeah, people of our generation do use it, but we're no
Right.
longer
But
teenagers,
it's
right?
like a
But
younger.
it hit the younger demographic that have only ever known the internet. They don't know life pre-internet.
Right.
They don't know life pre-smartphone. Like
They
to them, it's
right.
not a smartphone anymore. It's a phone.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is a pre-smartphone, right?
They are a strange generation. Say the least.
Exactly. So, and it's strange in a good way. I don't think it's a
No,
bad thing.
I don't mean to mean it as a negative, because there was one thing, sort of a quick little sidetrack, that this YouTuber had mentioned. Because you'd always look at, like, your parents tend to have solutions for, because they were all teens and whatnot before you.
Right.
So there's like a lot of wisdom to be gained from speaking to your parents on certain topics. But this new generation has like a completely new subset of problems that have, well, no, not even a subset. It's a new set of problems,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not a subset of the old problems. Because, mom and dad didn't have Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok and a smartphone when they were going to school. And it makes like an enormous difference.
Yep.
And it's like, when not, when your daughter comes home and says that like everyone's, unfriended her on Instagram or they're talking shit, it's like it's like you can sort of give general advice, but it's like it's a completely new set of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like parents no longer have like the toolkit for their kids. It's like, okay, what do I tell my son when it comes to all this like gobbledygook going on the internet?
Yeah. More interestingly, kind of add to that.
Yeah.
Our generation is kind of like the bridge, right? Of that,
Yeah.
where you'll see that. I mean, I don't know. So yeah, I guess as a bridge, because I would say not necessarily like Gen Z are fathered or parented
Right.
by millennials, but they kind of are, right? And be it that some of them are siblings and things like that, so that they can kind of bridge the gap between like the old and the
Right.
new.
Like,
But yeah, like being able to see it from both perspectives is rather interesting.
Yeah, like when I was young, I lived in a time where, when I went out with my friends, my mom had to contact their parents, and then she had to get lucky if I was actually at the place, and we weren't outside also hanging out.
Yeah,
because we used to go to the park or something. So it's like there used to be a time where I could be completely separated, not just physically, but like any sort of, because now we have, like, I think we're a new species, because I think it's an interesting theory that I have, where that's we as humans no longer evolve. We evolve, but we only evolve our tools. We don't necessarily evolve ourselves, because it's too slow. You get me? Like if we had to grow an appendage to swim, it would take forever. Like we either learn how to swim or we create things that swim for us. And I think smartphones essentially turned us into a new species where we have the physical reality, and then we have like this electrical reality. I don't know. There's probably a better term for it.
It's like a new sense that was added to our body.
It was a new sense that was because there used to be a time where if I left the house, unless I contacted my mom, let her know I'm right here right now, or I'm going here, you just got to trust me. It's like, it is what it is. Like you're not contacting me. Like you're not getting to me if I'm not close to a phone.
Yep.
Like there's no sense of that now. Everything is so interconnected. There's no, like, you can still be by yourself, but the world essentially rests on your lap if you have your phone there. It's like it's
Yeah. I mean, I mean, to add to that too, like a lot of parents, like I guess your generations, they probably have like, phone tracking capabilities on their kids, so they would know where they're at all the time. I mean, that's a separate side issue.
right.
But as like as another tidbit to that, it's like it's not only like, yeah, we got to I guess to kind of expand on your analogy, the phone, yeah, like it basically gave us the next step in our evolution, right? Like it gave us an organ or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But there's this interesting problem now where it's like our hardware, our original hardware, it's old, and it's kind of causing conflicts with the new edition, right? The new piece we have, the phone or the technology, and what I see is like, I was reading, I was listening to this scientist talk. I forgot his name. But essentially with like the whole nervous system, right, where we have our flight or fight responses. It's like, well, that was very useful when we would have to hunt and run from predators and things like that. But the problem is in modern day life, that system can't tell the difference between us getting chased by a predator or us having to do a presentation or us having to talk to people, right?
Right. Yeah. So that came up in that 5-minute video.
Yeah, exactly. So, and now we have this new sense, this new organ that connects us to an infinite amount of ideas and people. And it kind of seems to be that at least for a lot of the people in the younger generation that don't know anything pre-technology, I guess modern technology, that a lot of them are having problems, mental problems, anxiety, depression, things like that. So it's like kind of, I don't want to say interesting, but it's certainly something to see, like this division or this fight between who a human really is, versus these new technological advances.
Right. Like there's the I think the guy is Jonathan Haidt. I think he's the one who talked about it, but he might have been the one who did the actual research. But like, if you like, social media is so devastating for young girls, not for young men, for young girls, because because of the way we bully each other, like men, the way the social interact, because most people still, as much as everything's being be inclusive and whatnot, people tend to hang out with the same sex, and the social dynamics are so different between how men act around men and how women act around women. Like men, we sort of have like this, we sort of tease and all that, and the bullying usually tends to occur is usually physical. Like like some guy comes, beats your ass. Maybe he goes a little too far with the teasing and he does insult you and whatnot, but like it sort of ends there. It's like, the fight is like the ultimate end for male like aggression. It's like, okay, if we can't fix this verbally, we just fight and it all comes to an end. That's why you always hear the stories like, yeah, we fought it out and then we shared a drink. It's like that's the male end to conflict resolution. But for females, it's like so different because they tend to stand. They like the way they speak to each other is different, and when they pick on each other, it's like it's scathing. Like there's a lot of insults, but there's also a lot of like what you call it. You also isolate people, and you sort of gang up on each other, and you could see how that could compound with like the introduction of social media, because it's like, okay, at the very least before you could go home and it's like, all right, I'm safe, like game over.
Yeah.
But it's like now it's like, no, you're plugged in, girl. your social group will not leave you alone. And
yeah,
so
and for someone that's never known anything
Right.
outside of of
right.
being connected on the internet, it's can't
Yeah.
imagine that's easy.
Well, it's like the what they found was, it's a horrible fact, but there's cases of self harm. You get me? Like, there's some
Mhm.
girls know to cut and all that. And I don't want to get the number wrong, but the increase in self harm like was dramatically large. I don't know if it doubled, but it was so like undeniably like you couldn't. There's no other explanation for it. It's like you see the on the map, you know, smartphone, and then you see the giant spike. It's like there's like no other explanation for this. It's like it's so horrific.
Right.
Right. The other one that also tends to affect young girls more, it's like social contagions,
Mm.
where it's like, one girl gets bulimia. It tends to be the case that like the rest of her social group also tends to get that. And you can imagine how large of a social group you can get on the internet.
Yeah, I think that was somewhat related to what Instagram found. I don't know if you heard about that on the news recently.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
basically Instagram found that their platform may be causing harm to young girls
Yeah.
out of all the groups.
The Jonathan Haidt research, I think, was like from 2000 and something. Like it was 2016-ish, maybe. So they knew about it. At least Jonathan Haidt and everyone he
Right.
tried to tell. I'd imagine Facebook. It probably crossed Facebook's, Instagram's books somewhere. Someone must have like at least tried to like send it to them. You get me?
Yeah. I don't remember the whole story, but I think
Right.
some research on Instagram leaked it to
Right.
the press or something, right? Because like he
Yeah.
or she was so concerned, and
Right.
Facebook, Instagram kind of chalked it up to, well, that's just kind of business, and they didn't really care.
Well, in Instagram's defense, not that I want to defend them by any means at all, like, because I'm not the biggest fan of social media. It's not
Right.
like they designed this. Like there was no intent of going, yeah, we're gonna make it so that these girls harm each other. Like that's the software in the humans that's causing that issue. Like
Right.
they could probably there's probably something they could do. Maybe I don't know. They could probably brainstorm how to not make this problem as bad as it is, but it's not like it originated with them. They just sort of they just sort of became like the unlikely catalyst that just made it worse. It's like fuck me. Like I just released the product. I didn't have any idea it would cause this. Like nobody thought that. Like Facebook, like I'm not a fan of Mark Zuckerberg either, but he like every time you see him in Senate, he's like, I didn't fuck. He has this look like I didn't fucking know all this shit was gonna happen when I made my social network. Like, how the fuck was I gonna know that Russia was gonna put disinformation for both sides of the political campaign? They're just essentially lying, running rampant. Everyone's like in their own little silo. It's like I didn't want to do this. I just wanted to make like something that people could talk to and post. Like, the rest is like, it's
Right.
like again, I don't like defending them because it's like I'm not a big fan of social media, but
Mhm.
there is I think there should be some, maybe not blame, but recognition that a lot of it is just the human software interacting with these platforms and just running amok, because it's like,
Yeah.
what a mess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good point. It's like the software. I keep saying that the quote unquote algorithm, right? It really is just a representation of human interest, right? Albeit, I would say a far more aggressive, intense version of it.
Right.
But that's essentially what it is, right? Like without humans, there is no social media, right? That's just kind of how it works. So, yeah, you can look at any kind of event where it's like, most recently, like the elections, right?
Right.
You go online, you read the comments on any post that's related to politics, and you can clearly see it's very divisive. But that's a representation of the current affairs in our country.
Right.
Like, yeah, sure, it's a bit more skewed towards aggressiveness, but that's just because there's pseudo anonymity online.
Right.
But I would argue it's a true gauge of where we're at right now.
Well, I'm going to slightly push back on that, only insofar as there's a slight warp there, because it sort of baffled me when I saw this on Twitter. Because, a lot of people go on there and they have like their political pundits that they like follow.
Mhm.
And
Right.
sometimes, they post articles. So there's something to be said. But it turns out that two fun facts. The first one is it turns out that Twitter posts follow the Pareto distribution. So it's like 20% of the Twitter users make 80% of all the posts.
Right.
And it should be noted that the amount of people on Twitter is a small fraction of the US population. It's not,
Mhm.
I think it's only, I don't even know if it's like 13. It might be less than 13 million people on Twitter. And it's like we have like 300 million. Like you can immediately see that it doesn't even scratch. Like it's not even like 10%, I think, of the population that's on Twitter.
Yeah. So online, it's saying that at least in the US, it's only 73 million users. Worldwide, it's 203 million.
73 million. So that's not even
It's
10%.
Yeah, it's how much do we have in the US? Like 300 million. I think
Yeah, that's the number. That's the number they always throw around. That's the number I use.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10% would be 30.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that. I will push back a little bit too. Although, yeah, I think you mentioned this to me too in the past. With regards to the Pareto's principle 80-20 on Twitter. And how do I explain this? But I mean, as like it's probably a good statistical sample. I would say to put it promptly. I could be wrong, but
Yeah,
that's kind of how I would say. Like, yeah, sure. I mean, it'd be very difficult to get every single person on Twitter.
right.
But
Not that I would want them to.
not that you would want to. And that's not the point of this either. But
Right.
I think if you were to take a sample, and it probably does, Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, all social media, they are kind of like left leaning and left biased a bit.
Right.
But I would say if you take a sample of like the users, you probably would get like a nice distribution of a nice sample of the entire U.S. population. I would say.
I'm like
now, whether as to those are the ones that are speaking loudest,
yeah,
I don't know.
Right. I might agree with that. Like the notion that the people that are sort of to bolster your point, I might agree that it probably is the case that as a whole, given that most of them probably aren't even being political, they're probably just, tweeting stuff that's consequential to the politics. Right. It probably is the case that there's like a diverse view. And I mean, the people, and again, the people that are talking loud, the 20, are the kind of people that are activists, the kind of people that are involved like strongly in politics. You could say that even if they aren't representative of the views, they are representative of the people that are actually doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like maybe even if the rest of the country doesn't necessarily think, regardless of which side you're on, as much as these people do, it's still duly noted to look at them, because it's like, well, these guys are the busybodies, the guys that like set everything up. So it's like it might be good to keep an eye on, because there probably is something to be said there.
Right, exactly. And to add to that too, the reason why I had originally said that, like social media is kind of like a representation of, of human interest, that it's a good gauge of that, is because like with regards to like,
I don't know if it's the same idea you were having, but you could say that these people congregate like a large following. So it could be the case that these ideas are attractive. So because the ideas are attractive, like it's not that just that they're attractive. It's like the people that are following them agree with the ideas. So it might not be a bad metric to gauge things.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And on top of that, like with regards to the fact that let me take a stab at it. With regards to the fact that it's a good representation of I guess of like human sentiment at the point. The part where I said it's a bit more aggressive in those inclinations.
Yeah,
is the fact that the algorithm will basically push out what it thinks will get the most clicks, the most views, right? Because that's what gets the most ad revenue. So when you have the 20% of the people speaking very loudly, obviously those 20% of people that are pushing that content, they're gonna get their viewers from people that are probably as equally vocal, right?
Right.
And that kind of causes this whole feedback loop where like the content gets shared, that gets more people, that gets more shared, that gets more people, that gets more shared.
Right. It's like
the algorithm sees it as an absolute win because it's just raking in the views and the ads on it.
Sort of like once you become popular enough, it sort of runs on its own, just making your regular content. It's like you become you become popular, you start putting content out. You put content out because of that. The algorithm, the systems goes, oh, look at this guy. He's like super popular. Let's, or at least there's a lot of traffic going on here. Let's make it so that he gets more traffic. And it just sort of goes on like that cyclically until he just stops getting people.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think I probably would concede to your point that it might not be the best sample. Of humanity where once like these groups get so huge and so vocal, right, they do become echo chambers, right? So like suddenly you'll log into Twitter and you'll see like just a bunch, like just a shit show of politics left and right, and you'll see like for better you'll see for what it's worth like the most vocal views from all different sides. And suddenly you're thinking to yourself like, holy shit, my country is like super polarized. And it is, but it probably isn't to the extent that you're seeing on Twitter, because those pieces of content that you're seeing are the ones that made it to the top of the feed, the ones that had the most attention. Like if you saw two pieces of content, right? For example, one was like lawyer gets fired. Crap.
Well, it's like you could see lawyer gets fired due to minor infraction in law is like one title, and then the other title's like your civil liberties are being destroyed. Lawyer, right? Kangaroo courts have dismissed lawyer because of da 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 da. It's like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Like the headlines are so inflammatory.
It's almost like obviously the one that leads with fear is the one that will get clicked on, right? And it's almost comical because like and I think this is kind of where the outliers. I would much rather click on a headline that gives me more information, but that's the one, that's exactly the one that's going to get clicked on the least, because if it gives you more information, people will read it and the probability that they'll understand it will be a bit higher. But if it leads with fear, people will click it, people will share it, and I would even argue, just anecdotally from what I've seen, people won't even read the damn article. They'll just read the headline, and they'll get mad based off the headline.
Well, go on.
No, go for it.
Oh no, I was going to say, I always told Caesar that people don't make up an opinion; they're usually handed their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are so quick. Like I've read a bunch of articles where I see the headline and I'm just like, well, this is fucking horrific if true. And then I read the article and I'm like, that's not at all what your title was. This is so blatantly false. It's so well, it's like, people always they always underestimate the power of like your emotions and how much you're driven by them, how much you're exclusively driven by them, and your rationale sort of taking the back seat. But it's like anger is such an easy one. Like there was a time where it's like people used to like complain about, because there's always someone like they did something in this video game or they changed this character to that. And at first I thought like, okay, I could sort of see why the people complaining about it are mad. But I always thought to myself, like, why the hell are these people making these articles? Or why are they making these changes? And after a while, I just realized, like, oh, this is all just free publicity. Yeah. You do one small thing that's like controversial, but inconsequential to like the whole thing. And it's like you just get like all this free publicity without doing anything. And I'm like, this is so evil. Like I don't ever want to release a product like this. It's just so evil. You're just sort of angering people so that they can make your ads for you. Like screw you. It's so bad. It's so I also try to not share those articles when I see them, just because it's like I'm feeding into the beast. And I'd rather not.
Oh man, yeah. There was so like I don't use Facebook or even Snapchat at all anymore. I have an Instagram that I just kind of use to shit post,
right?
And just look at memes, and that's mostly Reddit too. Right. But I do follow. There was in high school the AP government teacher gave pretty good advice that I still follow till his day, where it's like with regards to like any current topic that you want to learn, follow a left-leaning media publication, something that's a bit moderate, and then something that leans right. Yeah. And then with regards to whatever topic you want to like know about, read the same article from all three different publications, right? And the more publications, the better. That way you can kind of get like a more roundabout, nuanced understanding of the topic. And that's something that I still do to this day. Because I kind of found that, obviously even with like the moderate, slash quote unquote neutral, there's still going to be leanings because it's a human that wrote it and they have emotions.
Right. Of course. Everyone has their own little bias.
Yeah. But if you can read all the different kind of biases, then you can kind of start to see like, kind of where that, quote unquote, the truth kind of lies. Right.
Right.
And then from there, you can kind of come up with your own conclusions on that. Right. But where I found this funny in the morning, as I was kind of just like reading about, I saw, I think it was from the New York Times or the New York Post. I forget which one. It was the headline was Kobe Bryant's wife getting sued by, I think is it the LA County. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. I go straight into the comments and it's just everyone mad that LA County or whatever county it is suing Kobe Bryant's wife.
That's funny.
I read the article and it's like, no, or sorry, not getting sued. They're asking her to submit to a psychological, psychiatric test or something like that. That's what it was. Yeah. And obviously everyone's mad. It's like, why would you do that to the poor woman that just lost, her family, right?
Right.
And they're like, no, and other comments are saying like, oh, you should, she should sue the city or whatever. And then you read the article and it's like, well, no, she sued the city because she said that she had psychological stress when someone at some bar showed her images of, or video of the crash, right? That happened to her family.
Right.
And as a condition or as like evidence of like the civil lawsuit, they're asking her to submit to a psychiatric test, which is actually a relatively common procedure when you have things of that nature. But there was only like one person in like those 3,000 comments that read it and mentioned the exact same thing. Yeah. And obviously he was at the bottom of the comments with like two likes on it. And everyone else is mad without having read it.
Having read it, just mad for no reason. I know.
For no reason. But the thing is like, I sat, I always do this. Like I sit and think to myself, like, it's like, obviously they could have read the article, right? But
right.
they chose not to. And they probably, I mean, I have to think that they probably realize that there's more to it than just that. Like I refuse to believe people are that stupid that they won't read more into it, right? But having said that, I kind of always come to the same conclusion. People just want to be mad because that gives them like something to do, some purpose, right?
Right.
Like it almost kind of goes back to religion, like whether or not you believe in religion, it's great because it gives it gives people reason to be, reason to keep going. I don't know. It's just, and I always come to the same conclusion every single time I read some article like that. I'm like, well, I think people just want to feel something because they'd rather not believe in the existential dread or some shit. I don't know.
I wouldn't want to call them stupid just because it's not like it's necessarily correlated with intelligence, because you can see a lot of smart people also just be dumb on like certain topics where it's like they also let their emotions get the better of them. You get me?
Yeah, I mean, it happens to all of us for sure.
Right. Like I see, like I'm no fan of Donald Trump. You get me? But I saw a lot of smart people going on about like white supremacists, da 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 da. And I'm like, look, the guy's like, I'm not a big fan. I don't think he was that great of a president, but like, the hell are you on about? Like, there's no, like, there's like legit criticisms, but you're sticking to like the emotional, like completely wrong, like just no basis for argument. Like, and I think it's easy for anyone to just sort of get swept up in the emotion of it all, because everyone's like, it's so easy to just feel something and then rationalize afterwards. Like, I'm mad at this. Oh, look, they gave me some reason to attach my anger to this. It's like, all right, now I can. But it's just, I think anyone can fall prey regardless of intelligence. But I do agree. Nobody ever really looks too much more after it. I mean,
yeah, it's unfortunate. And when I say that, about them being stupid, it's like it's more so on like, I refuse to believe that we as a human species are that, I don't know, blind, I guess, to emotion. Like I want to believe like that we can be better than that, right? Like you're just letting emotions get to you.
Right. We can be better, but
the optimist in me, I guess.
But Jose, why think when I can feel?
That is true. It's like, a lot easier, I guess.
I also don't want to denigrate people's emotions, but like there needs to be, like, I can't argue emotions. You get me? Like if we're talking about it, if we talk about a topic and you want to go, well, I'm angry. Like, okay, fair enough. Like you can be angry if you want. But there, at some point, it's like reality has to step in. We can't live on our emotions alone.
That's the thing, though. Reality doesn't have to step in, Jerry, because we live in the age of the internet where you can find people in silos that feel exactly how you do, and you can just stay there.
Yeah,
see, that's the problem.
I'm a big fan of my boy Jordan Peterson.
Yep.
There's one thing that I had the idea, and he talked about it at too, and I found it interesting. And I came to the conclusion before I had met him. But his thing, it's like, he makes the statement, no one ever gets away with lying. And then he talks about, he's like, it's funny, you can listen to it in a song, but he's like, he's like, you're just gonna lie, like, that's your theory, huh? Like, there's all this reality in the world and you're just gonna set yourself against it. Like that's the model you want to live by. And I think there's I've recently been putting everything. I realized that the easiest way to like test something is to put it through like, well, not the easiest, but the most definitive way is to put it through like the test of time. Like if something lasts, like things, like if something lasts a long time, it's like there's something more solid and concrete behind it. And I don't think lies last. Like you can say you can get away with a lie today. You might get away with a lie in a year, but a lie does not last forever. Like if people want to just live in their emotions and deny reality, like eventually reality will come crumbling upon them. And I don't just mean they'll learn what the truth is. I mean, like once we realize that we've been living in a fantasy and like civilization is collapsing and, you know, everything's going to hell. It's like, all right, like, are you, you know, you can still feel emotional, but it's like reality set in. Like time has been the ultimate arbiter, and it turns out that you can't just deny reality. You can't lie throughout your existence. Like even if you lie successfully through your entire life, like I always think it's so damaging, the fact that politicians are lying, because you could say, well, the politician got away with it. And I mean, sure, you could say maybe he didn't get arrested for his lie, or he was never brought to justice. But a lie causes a lie from a politician causes terrible damage to the institution of politics. So it's like, well, people maybe have less, you know, maybe people don't trust their government enough. Maybe this persists over time. You know, maybe this untrust in the government makes it so that people don't listen to anything that the government says. Maybe this plays out over a couple of generations, and it's like one day it's like something happens and it's like civil war, and it's like, okay, maybe it's like, you know, maybe if you trace it back long enough, this is this guy's lie finally coming back to haunt everyone.
Right. That's a good point. But I do think it is important to make the distinction, though, right? That it's not necessarily the individual that is refusing to live in reality that will pay the price. It's more so the collective, you know,
right?
The collective society, right? And that kind of brings up another problem, right? Or another thing to think about, where it's like, at least in the U.S., we're very highly individualistic. It's like people don't care because it's not them that's going to suffer the consequences, right?
Right.
Because again, we're highly individualist.
Right.
So, like how do we get around that issue then?
It's a tough one. I thought, like, I'm a big fan of the individual, but I do think there's a problem that we have that. Well, I think there's a couple. One problem that I think we have is like we've completely denigrated the role of the family, like at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if we're taking it as like, if you ignore all the love and the feelings as a pure, like, if you wanted to just reduce it to dollar signs and health, having a family is so much more useful in all metrics. Like having a, you know, father, mother, brothers, you're probably like, even if you're more well off. You tend to live longer if you have a wife. You know, there's a lot more resources to draw from. Like it's just way more useful to have. That's one of those things that I'm like, why are we denigrating this? Who's against this? Why is there any kind of attack happening to the familial unit? Like, why are we allowing this to happen? Like this seems so insane to me. Like it's all downside. There's no upside to not having a family. Like it's like, stop this. Like stop it. Like everyone on any political side, stop this denigration of the family. What the fuck are you doing? Like if you want to expand it, like I'm open to the notion. If you want to go, like maybe certain households can have 2 dads or 2 moms and it's like, all right, go for it. I don't really care, you know.
As long as you got a family, right?
Like that's, if you want to experiment, like, you know, that's sort of like the American ethos in my view. It's like, all right, you know, do what you want. I don't really give a shit. Like, you know, you ain't harming nobody. It's fine by me. So it's like, if you want to add a couple of more like variations to the family, like fair enough, but it's like it's not something I want to denigrate. The other one, I would say the internet has helped and both harmed and helped it. This notion, because it's like we've sort of grown foreign to one another. And I think it's a pretty bad view. It's pretty bad to have because it's like I conceptualize us all as just countrymen. I want like I like even the guy, the Republican, the Democrat, even the guy who's like preaching communism, like they're all my countrymen. Get me? Like irregardless of whether the guy who I voted for won or lost, I want the guy who won to do well. He's my governor, he's my president. I didn't vote for Biden, but I want Biden to do well. I want the country to do well. I want my countrymen to do well. But we've gotten this strange divide where I don't know how we don't really view ourselves as a collective country. Like we're like you had people during the Trump administration go like, oh, the fucking economy tanks. And it's like, excuse me? Like, what do you mean you want the economy to fucking tank?
That affects all of us, you idiot.
Like on top of it just being stupid. But it's like it became a so us versus them. And I'm like, you got politics completely wrong. Like it's not us versus them, unless you're referring to like another country. And even then it's like us versus them is a little too dramatic. It's like, yeah, we want to do better than China and we want to do better than Russia, but I don't know if I'd directly put us as adversaries in like a super like us versus them way. Like I just want to do better than them.
Right, yeah.
But it's like I get it, you're on this side of the political, stream and I'm on this side and XYZ and whatever. Like we're all just disagreeing on how we want our country run and a lot of other stuff. We're not completely like adversarial. Like we're just trying to figure it all out. Like just relax. Like, quit trying. Like don't divide the country on something as dumb as politics. Like it's like we're countrymen. We're one another. And the internet sort of helped like just completely like throw like a nuke at that because it's like, oh, okay, well, it's like now we're on the internet. I can find my super niche group. And now we can become like the mega horrific version of whatever political.
The extreme version. Yeah.
And it's like, then it's like I don't think in the physical reality, the white supremacist is like a actual threat. Like, like the Klan got like, I always like this statistic. The Klan got twice as many people this year than they got last year. And it's like, oh, it got 6 members instead of 3. It's like, oh wow, how terrifying. It's like, but in the virtual world, it's like you have a bunch of people, some people shit posting, some people taking advantage of the shit posting and doing it for real. And it's like, oh, everyone's terrified, but it's like, there's not that many of them,
Yeah, I mean, there may be some online that are too scared to come out, but I mean, I would say it's probably not a.
If you map them on like a map, you'd be like, oh, like if you like, how you have those maps of like where the lights are turned on for each country for like population.
Yeah, they're North Korea.
Right, you would essentially. Right. You would see one light, one little dot. It'd be like that. It'd be like that for the extremist on the left. Like if you go for like the super mega communist who's just ready to bomb the White House, you would see like 2 at a university and then that'd be it. It's like, it's such a small number. But it's so easy to like just congregate on the worst. And it doesn't help that as a political tactic, smearing, like, I was thinking about it's the tactic of like bad mouthing your opponent. And it occurred to me, it's like such a useful tactic because you lose nothing. Like there's no loss. Like nobody on your side cares if you shit talk them. It's like, okay, we all sort of feel the same.
Mm-hmm.
All it but it feels like you're doing something. So it's like I'm shit talking. It's like I call those like political solutions where it's like I'm giving mouth service, but really nothing is happening. Like
Well, I mean, there is something happening, right? It's right. Serving to draw a divide, right, in between the groups.
Right. Well,
and the opposing group is probably going to hate you more.
Right. I suppose what I mean by nothing's happening is nothing of positive value. It's probably more
of use.
It's probably more accurate. Like when you see like a politician make like a committee group, it's like, oh, look, they made a committee. Something's going to happen. I think Biden did one for like reparations. Mm-hmm. But really all it means, it's like, oh, we got a committee group, but we're not going to do anything.
Right.
We gave it thought. We thought about it, but I mean, we just thought about it. Nothing's happening. We just thought about it. We put it on our agenda, but we're not actually going to do anything. But it's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, I mean, I would say even crazier is probably the fact that, I mean, I've never looked too deep into the data, but I would argue, probably put some money on it too, that most people are probably somewhere in the middle. They're not extreme left or extreme right. Most people are probably moderate with slight leans either way.
Right. But I agree with that.
See, that's the thing, like kind of like with that video that you sent me the other day ago, that how politics
pro wrestling.
Yeah. So it's like that moderate, it doesn't sell, right? And it doesn't stir people up. So kind of like pro wrestling, you got to exaggerate it. You got to get that kayfabe going. And
the kayfabe.
Some you have like these extreme left and right groups that are minorities of minorities. Right. And now that gets the views, that gets people riled up.
Yeah.
Then you introduce the fear of the other side and what the other side could do, knowing damn well that this government it's always in gridlock because that's how it was designed, and nothing really gets done that quick.
Nothing ever gets passed. Like nothing gets passed. Like I'm fairly certain that's why we're doing all these executive orders, because it's like, try to get something past Congress. Like nobody's gonna fucking pass anything.
Yeah, I mean, and to the point, I think in terms of like outcomes, obviously it's probably been net negative, but where people don't realize the effects of the extreme polarization is now things that used to be done in Congress that were just kind of like standard, bipartisan things are becoming hugely polarized. Like this whole I'm sure you might have kept up, like the whole past like probably 2-3 weeks ago at this point.
Yeah.
Raising the debt ceiling was never a partisan thing since the start of debt ceilings having to be raised like 20-30 years ago.
It literally has nothing to do with there's no political like leaning toward it. It's like, do you want to default on your debt, or do you want to like keep going as a country?
Exactly. But now, because you have to save face with your own constituents, and that's just how the game is played nowadays. You have to oppose it if you're Republican, and I get it. You have to play the political game. There's a very good reason why Republicans were opposed to raising the debt ceiling. They wanted Democrats to use budget reconciliation to pass it through, because they only have one more shot at doing it before end of term.
Yeah.
So I get it. If they did it, if they forced Democrats to raise debt ceiling via that process, then they lose their shot at passing their infrastructure packages, which Republicans don't want. I completely get the game, but it's so stupid that you're willing to go to such lengths.
Right. I looked into it. I saw both that. I thought both of it was. I thought it was just completely idiotic on all ends. I'm like, what is this bullshit?
Yeah,
like, it's not like the rules are like arbitrary. Like we decided on these rules. Why the fuck are these the rules? Like why is this how we're like deciding the fate of our country on this like political game of chicken? It's like, who's gonna vote first, huh? Let's see what fucking happens.
But see, that's the thing. Like when you send me the video of how politics became like pro wrestling, it
Yeah.
like sure it probably confirmed my bias towards the shit show that government is.
Right.
But it made so much sense, right? Because that is generating views. It's solidifying
Right.
which side you belong to.
It's like a
People get
weird
mad.
win. It's a weird win-win for both sides. Even
Yeah,
if
but
it's
it's a net loss as a whole.
the net loss as a whole. That's it's so funny. Going back to the trust issue, someone once, I think it might have been Eric Weinstein, he talked about how, maybe there's some things that should be done in the back room in private, like we vote in private. So it's like, maybe there's some, and he's not like, when he talks about like the CIA and all that, it's like, I don't mind having a secret police, if they're doing their job properly. It's like, but maybe there's some things about governance that might sort of need like a back room. Like we just put these people in a room and like people that we could trust in a room and just let them sort everything out. And it's like I don't, while it's sort of a mess that we're like watching all these senators like doing everything and like everyone's scrutinizing everyone, making a theater out of everything. At the same time, I don't know how many of them I would trust if someone was like, hey, we're just going to turn off all the cameras and going to get to work.
Right. Yeah. And I would say part of the problem with that is that you yourself didn't vote for that decision, right? You have almost no say. I mean, we're a republic, right? We vote, we delegate our vote to someone to vote on our behalf. Sure, I get that. But part of the problem being that, like, fuck, dog, we're in the 21st century. It's 2021. We are still voting on paper, right? I know we've talked about this many times. Like, there are systems, electronic systems that you can use that would pretty much make it to where you wouldn't have to trust the government because everything's on a public ledger, right? You use blockchain as that example. Suddenly, you don't have to trust your representative because you can see exactly how they vote. You can see exactly where your vote is, how it was counted, whether or not it was counted, and where the money is going. That could all be done public instantly at a fraction of all the costs that we currently have.
Right.
But the problem is, left or right or even moderate, we're not talking about solutions anymore, and we haven't been talking about solutions for a very long time.
I know.
We're talking about how we hate the other side.
Well, I thought that's true. That's so true. But there was an idea I sort of had once I was reading some stuff and looking into it, and it sort of occurred to me because I was thinking, it was sort of when I was thinking about all the stuff that was happening with the pandemic and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me, I'm like, our country, because if you don't have a goal as a person, life becomes very tough because you have like no aim. So you're sort of drift along, you sort of embodying whatever goal or dream is given to you. So it's like if you have no vision, it becomes pretty bad as an individual. And it occurred to me that our country has like no vision, no goal. Like there's no tangible thing you could say, here's what our country's trying to do right now.
Right. It's almost like we peaked like, 30 years ago when we became, 20, 30 years ago when we became like the superpower of the world. And we just kind of been riding that high ever since.
Like there's no leader. Like you've had if you watched, I don't know if you watched the second part of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where it's like the next few leaders that try to push a vision all sort of did it with like, maybe if you trust the video, with like a hidden intention to like transfer wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I sort of put some weight into it because there seems to be some truth to it for me, at least, given how, it's like the wealth has only been congregating in one direction. And so I'm somewhat skeptical as to what the what the goals have been that have been sold to us as actual goals. It's like, but we have nothing. We sort of have nothing. Like California is sort of a deadbeat, right? Like the U.S. is sort of a deadbeat right now. It's like we have no real plans. We're sort of drifting along. We don't know if we want to be a superpower, if we still want to do anything. At the very least, nothing is being told to us. Like,
right.
And I think it's deranging us in some aspects, because it's like, if we had a competent leader to at least, well, I don't know, even if we had a competent leader, it's not clear whether we would just tear him down politically.
Probably would come off as radical, right? And I think that's squarely our fault, the people's fault, right? That's because I mean it's full circle, but like it's almost like we the people would prefer to just fight one another, because that's almost easier than having to come up with solutions, right?
Oh,
like I almost laugh when I see people like, oh, true communism has never been tried, and we need to try it because that's like salvation, or we need to do utopia, or we need to do socialism or this or that, right? And I'm thinking to myself, like I'm looking at to the best of my ability of what I think is how the future is going to go based on my tech background. Right. It's like, well, AI is a thing, and eternal youth and eternal like living longer is probably going to become a thing in the next years, and all this other technologies. There's good and bad implications. It's like, how are you going to tell me that old ideas are going to save us? Like, shouldn't we be coming up with new systems, new ideas, sitting down and really thinking about them? Like it's been pretty obvious, over the past century, the different philosophies, different ideas, regulations we put in place, pretty much everything we've tried, different governments across the world. Yeah, a lot of it is not working. No. Actually, I would say none of it is working. Just look at the monetary policies of all major governments. They're not working. The only reason the U.S. is even half decent is because we are the world reserve currency. Look up the petrodollar, right? Mm-hmm. But at some point, fiat currencies fall. They have all fallen. Yeah. So, like whether that's by design, if you believe those conspiracy theories or not, that's a whole separate subject. But at some point, it's like you have to stop looking back and trying to implement or keep the status quo or whatever it be, and start looking to the future, and really sit down and think about what systems in place we should put for the future. And I'm pretty doubtful that it's going to be communism or some old system in place, right? No. Like I remember, when Yin came out with trying to make UBI super popular, and people were like, "Oh, that's communism, that's socialism." People don't even know what the difference is between any of those. And I'm thinking to myself, like, well, like just look at the rate of automation and read. Even if he had just read the book that he came out with, which had some really good data on it. It's like a lot of it makes sense. Like maybe UBI is not the answer, but it's a brand new idea that if enough people take the time, if enough people take the time to understand it, maybe that spins off another idea, right? And then that ends up becoming a positive for society, right? But people aren't willing to sit down and have their conversations and think.
That is true. That is so true.
And that's the problem. Because again, that is a lot harder than yelling at your opponent or making an opponent out of someone else.
Much easier to follow about inconsequential today than worry about the looming problems of tomorrow.
Exactly. And that's just my perspective. I don't pretend to have all the answers.
Oh, but I don't have any either.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear that what we've been doing for the past century is not working, and it's just getting worse and worse as we progress as a human species.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree.
It's I don't know. It's a tough one for sure.
Right. Also, UBI isn't communism; it's super capitalism.
Try explaining that one to people. I agree with you. I fully agree with you. Mm-hmm. But
yeah, I had just as a quick one because I need a shower. I had a I don't know if I'd call it radical because I don't know if anyone's ever proposed it. I didn't Google it. Proposition about like all these social programs. Like it would never get passed by anyone because it's like so. Because part of the problem with like a lot of social programs, it's like I think Yang sort of points out to it too. It's like you need to be under a certain wealth limit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you want healthcare. It's like you need to make less money than X, Y, or Z.
Right.
And I was thinking, like, well, clearly there's an issue because we're like botting them. Like the aid isn't like that's part of the solution that like UBI wants to answer. It's like fuck it, just give everyone the money and then they'll let God decide. But I thought like, what if all these social programs worked in the sort of the reverse of what they're doing? Because it's like if you're not earning wealth, or at least you're not attempting to, you lose your aid.
That's an interesting idea.
Because it's like
then there's an incentive to be productive and contribute, right?
Right, because it's like
the whole.
Because it's like if you're middle class, like maybe the middle class isn't, but if you're like right on the verge of like middle, lower, if you could still keep all those like benefits, like of healthcare and whatever else, WIC and all those other, it's like that's like a giant financial burden off your back, and it's like you could just keep boosting forward.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, again, I prefer UBI because UBI is like fuck it. If you're gonna, here you go, here's your flat towel, do what you got to do. But I was just thinking, it just occurred to me. I'm like, what if we completely changed the incentive for these healthcare providers and all these social programs? I mean, because like homeless people, they always offer housing and all of that for them, but they just fucking leave, or once they stop being homeless, it's like, once they start making wealth, it's like, all right, well, you're no longer homeless. You need to start paying rent, or you need to, like, there's no, like the second they verge on the edge of success, it's like, okay, now you lose all your handicaps. Like now you got to fight like everyone else. And I'm thinking like, no, if they're fighting, they keep the handicaps. But if they stop, you remove them, period. Even if they are broke, you lose your handicaps. Get out of here.
That's a good point. Kind of related to that. Earlier today, I saw this post. I'll just kind of read it out very quickly before you go.
Yeah.
It says, nobody, quote unquote, likes paying tax, but at least here in Scotland, we get to use the hospitals, university, infrastructure, prescription drugs, and more that are tax funded at no extra cost.
Right.
I feel sorry for Americans who also pay tax, but without these benefits. And then at the bottom says, nice military though, ... And as you can imagine, the comments are like, yeah, but you pay a lot more in taxes. And but like Scotland is a small country, would never work, completely ignoring economies of scale, which people don't understand. I took it upon myself to do the math, right?
Yeah.
So I did two scenarios, one for Scotland and one for us being Los Angeles, California, right? So if the assumption is you make $100K a year salary, your effective tax rate would be 33% in LA, okay? Yeah. Now, if you were a resident in Scotland, your effective tax rate would be 32.5%.
Yeah.
So essentially, you're paying 0.5% less in taxes.
Yeah.
And you have access to everything that the post mentioned. Obviously, ignoring cost of living and living quality and all that stuff. Like that's a whole separate thing, right?
Yeah.
But if we're just purely talking about those things, it's like, it kind of seems to me like there's like a willful ignorance going around here, thinking that that we ourselves can't do it either because we would have to pay more in taxes. When at least I get it, California, especially Los Angeles area, it is probably a bit more expensive than a lot of other states that have no state income tax and no other surtax property taxes. But like at least from our perspective that we do live in California, it would make sense. Like I would much rather keep paying the same amount of taxes, but have all those extra benefits, because it provides that social safety net for us. But
it also doesn't help that in our country it's hard to visualize where all our tax money is going. It's like they know for a fact where it's going, but it's like there's a bunch of like programs that we just like part of our tax money goes to keeping our national forests, and it's like we're not fucking waving our dicks around at Scotland going like, hey, we have like national forests larger than your whole fucking country. How does that feel, you fucking pussies?
Right.
And a lot of other things like that, like we drop like stacks of cash on the arts and who the fuck else knows what else. It's like it's a bit of a black box to like the regular like citizen. We're like we don't know where our money goes, but it's like, oh, it goes to a lot of stuff. It's just, it's hard to pinpoint because it's so much fucking cash, and two, it's like it's not directly stated. Like the California highway was paid by taxes. If you ever drive around the city, it's like, oh shit, look, they're rebuilding the roads again. How nice. So
yeah, that is. I mean, I think part of that is just that I mean, if you've ever worked in any part of government, you quickly see how outdated and disconnected all the different departments and organizations are. So that's a huge issue right there.
Jose, I use the government buildings. I know how inefficient they are. I don't even need to work there to know how bad it is.
Yeah. So I mean, but that's exactly what we need to modernize with new systems in place.
Right. I mean, I agree. I'm all for a public option for healthcare. I'm everything against it.
You got to be careful though, because it's awfully like a lot like communism, man.
No, it isn't.
We can't have that.
You still have your property rights. It's not communism.
It's sometimes like I know it's gonna piss me off going into the comments.
Yeah.
But like I can't help it because I just end up laughing at people that don't understand the difference and don't want to understand the differences.
Right. That's like the main delineation. Like it's the property rights. It's either the difference between us and them. It's like the state owns everything. And like here, it's like we have private property. It's like if we're not talking about private property, if we're not talking about dissolving that, it's like fine, make all the programs you fucking want. It's like whatever.
Yeah, that's. Oh man, you could talk about that for days, probably.
Why shouldn't our government work for us? It's like I don't have anything against it. Like,
see, that right there seems to be the distinction between a lot of like the Scandinavian countries, right? And also like for example, like Norway, where it's like at least from what I've been able to read and see like on throughout the internet, it's like for them, the people are the government, right? And despite the fact that like all countries have their own separate set of issues that they all have to work through.
Yeah.
But here, at least from my perspective in the U.S., it's like it almost feels like the government is its own separate entity that's kind of out to get me, or at the very least doesn't have
my interest,
my best interest in mind. And I kind of have to like be careful and stay clear of the government, or else it's going to screw me over. Because like really at the end of the day, like what has my government done for me? All it does is it just takes my money every single year, and I don't get much back from it. So
right. At least that's a prevailing viewpoint amongst a lot of people.
Yeah, it's an overly simplified one that it just made just for argument's sake. But the other one being that I think a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but like people probably on the right have issue with is and I think you mentioned it earlier too, is you have no problem with universal healthcare because it's going to help someone in need.
Yeah, that
seems to be a huge point of contention with people probably more on the right side of the spectrum, where it's like that to them it veers on entitlement, right? Where it's like, why should someone Why should they have to quote unquote subsidize someone's healthcare? Where it's like, okay, yeah, I get it. We're a highly individualistic nation, but I think you also kind of have to realize that when the individual is taken care of, they're able to rise up and benefit the country as a whole. And I think that's what people fail to realize.
Well, it's like when people have enough like of modicum of wealth, like people tend to live like the conservative life. The United States had like an interesting like model where it's like we live like the mental model of like pulling yourself by your bootstraps works on an individual level, but it's like you probably don't want to move that onto the government. The government should probably help the group, the country as a whole. It's like you want to ensure that the individual is doing well so that he can, help the country out as a whole.
Yeah.
Also, on a sort of side note, I think I know why the right uses the whole communist argument a lot. And it's not just because it's politically easy, much, because it is, just call something communist and just your whole side goes like, oh, yep, we can't have that now. It's something I thought about a while back where it's like, if you don't take care of your people or yourself and your responsibilities, someone else picks up the tab and that other person might not be the group you want it to. And I think for a while, a lot of the people advocating for the social programs and for workers' rights used to be the socialists and the communists. And even though those things aren't necessarily like, they don't, it's not communist to like, or socialist to for those ideas explicitly. Like you can have those in our system. The people advocating for them, it's like, it's hard to see past that. And I think the label sort of stuck around since then because it was like legit, like socialist and communist. You get me? Like they were advocating for it. It wasn't like the kind you see now that are just on Twitter tweeting about Marx. It's like people that like lived it, that like talked to the Soviet Union. And I think that label sort of just stuck around since then. It's like, okay, we saw the people advocating for it beforehand. So it's like we sort of just leave the label on them, even though it's like, the threat of those, ideologies isn't that high anymore.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. I don't know. It's to me it's always a funny sight when you clearly see, like, again, kind of going back to the Scandinavian countries, it's like clearly see like they're super ultra mega capitalist with some social safety nets.
I know.
But it's like the argument is like, oh, that would never work here because we have a lot more people. I'm like, again, economies of scale. Do you not realize how that works?
I always laugh when the socialists also go like, yeah, dude, we should be more socialist like the Scandinavian countries. And I'm like, to start with, if you talk like the president, I think of like Denmark, he's all like, he even explicitly said, he's like, no, we're not a socialist country. Like we are. We tried that and it fucking sucked. It's like we're super capitalist. We just have a lot more social programs than you dumbasses.
Oh, it's
yeah. So I laugh when either side brings them up. I'm like, dude, they're like mega capitalists. Like, just relax.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, I think, and it's not to say that that they have all the answers, right? Because of course, all countries have issues that they have to contend with. It's just that I think it's worth looking at systems in place that all different countries have and kind of,
Right. Hold on. Good talk. I'll keep sending you some stuff. I have like a Word document with like articles, but
I'll do the same as I come across it.
For sure. I mean, all right, I'll talk to you later, my boy.
All right. Later, Jetty.
Latest.